Okay, welcome. My name's Alex Arawat. I'm the CEO of Destinations Southern Tasmania, and I'm delighted to see so many people in the room today. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the country that we're meeting on today. The Tasmanian tourism industry acknowledges the Tasmanian Aboriginal people and their enduring custodianship of Lutruwita, Tasmania. We honour 40,000 years of uninterrupted care, protection and belonging to these islands, before the invasion and colonisation of European settlement. As a tourism industry that welcomes visitors to these lands, we acknowledge our responsibility to represent to our visitors Tasmania's deep and complex history, fully, respectfully and truthfully. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people who continue to care for this country today. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. We honour their stories, songs, art and culture, and their aspirations for the future of their people in these lands. And we respectfully ask that tourism be a part of that future. Thank you to Kelly, Alfred and the team at the Rest Point Hotel and Casino for accommodating us today. Also thank you to the government through Tourism Tasmania for supporting the regional tourism organisations for the restart of cruise. We've done a couple of events so far. The first event was a cruise industry forum, which was more of a sort of higher level what's happening in cruise and some strategic thinking. This one's more operational, a pre-season briefing about what's actually going to happen during the season. Also thanks to Hype TV, Dave, Damon and the team there for setting up the tech today. They do a fantastic job and we're proud to work with them. So welcome to you all. You have been waiting for this day for a while, the cruise season restarting, but many of you have, many of the operators in the room have probably been the hardest hit during COVID, so we're really delighted to know that cruise ships are coming back and we'll be able to support your businesses to thrive. Great spread of operators from around the region. We're also recording this session. It will be available on our corporate website and we'll send the link out to all of you afterwards. And as I said, we are live streaming on Facebook at the moment to people. How many are we up to, Dave? All right. 27, I'll say. I'd also like to especially welcome many of the officers from the City of Hobart, but also the volunteers from the City of Hobart who've done a fantastic job over the years welcoming our visitors through the airport, at the market, especially during COVID as safety angels. And now Luke Kazali and the team at the City of Hobart are restarting that welcome programme at the cruise terminal. We're delighted to have you here. You're an incredibly important part of the mix. You're the first front face that welcome our visitors to Tasmania and to Hobart. And I'd just like to recognise you publicly for the work that you do. I'm very grateful to have you here. Welcome to our Deputy Chair, Dan Aitken, and Board Directors, Melita Hickling and Diane Ray. And we have a late apology today from the Lord Mayor, Anna Reynolds. Good, so the presenters that we're going to hear from today, we'll start off with Jill Abel, the CEO of Australian Cruise Association. Then we'll follow up by Dominic Malin, who's got a coming to us via video from Tourism Australia, so it's a pre-recorded video. Aletta Macdonald from Tourism Tasmania. Scott Wilcox, who's, I'm very proud to say, a late step-in for Kristy Little, who's lost her voice today. So, Scott, thank you very much for stepping up at the last minute for doing this. We're with you and we'll support you all the way. And Adi Munshi from the Tasmanian Travel and Information from the City of Hobart. And then you'll hear back from myself at the end, and then we'll have questions. We'll try to keep it tight and fast and interesting, but hold those questions to the end. So, Jill, I'd like to invite you up to kick off proceedings.
Thanks, Alex. Tight and fast. It doesn't really go in my vocabulary, Alex. I love this topic and I can talk all day long. So thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak to you this morning. Great to see some familiar faces. Great to see some of the volunteers that I know I've been involved with in my days down on the wharf. So, cruise is back. Yay. It's been a long, long 2.5 years, that's for sure. So we're at just about to hit 100% of global fleets back in operation. So a lot of people were thinking because the ban was only lifted in Australia on the 17th of April, that the rest of the world was kind of only coming back into cruise at that time too. But cruising has been going for over 18 months around the world. They're in more than over 100 countries. I think there's only a couple that are left to reopen. Vanuatu announced their reopening yesterday. Fiji's reopened. New Caledonia, New Zealand. The South Pacific was kind of towards the end, and we're hoping that Japan and China will follow before long. There's about 270 ships out cruising somewhere in the world at the moment, with about 550,000 berths. And since the restart of cruise, where it restarted initially in Europe and then through into the Americas, there's been around 19 million passengers have taken a cruise in that 18 months. So, talking about 19 million passengers going on a cruise ship, there's a lot of data that was collected. And I'd have to say that the cruise industry was probably one of the most instrumental sectors in assisting the health officials around the globe in collecting data and learning about COVID and how to operate larger numbers of people in smaller environments and work through a range of different protocols that enabled the industry to actually restart, and it had very few starts and stops. At the very, very beginning in Europe, there were a couple of the expedition ships that started up really early on, and there were a couple of stops and starts, but once the majority of the industry got going, there haven't been any stops since. So in terms of it up and going again, the biggest key element to share is that it's meant people have been able to get back to work. There's been jobs and that economic impact back into destinations. We've just had our ACA conference up in Townsville, and we had Adele Lebine-Romain from Deloitte do a presentation. The data that she's collected over the years around regional dispersal for tourism and the importance of cruise in that regional dispersal sphere is so important. Most international passenger or visitors that come into Australia tend to only visit capital cities, especially on their first visit into Australia. Cruise is actually enabling us the setting to actually ensure that international passengers are getting out into the regional destinations. Only today, Destination New South Wales put up a post on LinkedIn with some recent data that says around 20% of cruise passengers will revisit somewhere that they have called to on a cruise ship visit for a longer period of time at some stage. So that's really important data. And one of the things that I've been really developing over the last few years, and it's not even developing, it's like trying to bang on about, I guess, is that cruise needs to be considered as part of the overall tourism offering. Everyone chooses to do different holidays in different ways, and quite often do it in multiple different ways, whether it's land-based, whether it's a self-drive, whether it's fly, whether it's cruise. And the work that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute with Tourism Australia is actually really encompassing cruise into that overall tourism offering with some great importance. In terms of projections, so pre-COVID, 2019 data, there were around 30 million people taking a cruise each year somewhere in the world. It sounds like a huge number, but I think there's something like 3 times or 4 times that number just go to Orlando each year. So it's still a relatively small part of the tourism picture, but it is growing and it is becoming more popular. By 2026, we're now predicting that there'll be around 35 million passengers, so a 5 million passenger growth in the next 3 to 4 years. But the interesting thing is that the prediction of global penetration, and it's a reference to how many people within the population will take a cruise. So pre-COVID, Australia was one of the highest rating penetration of cruises, around 5%. The majority of the globe was sitting around that 4.5%. But there is predictions that cruise will grow to around 12% penetration. When we talk about readiness to cruise and people's response, there's a lot of data that's been collected through CLIA on this recently, and the latest research is showing that 84% of past cruisers will cruise again. But the really interesting one that always grabs me is that new to cruise is sitting at 69%, which is up about 20% from pre-COVID. So during COVID, a lot of the research suggested that those that loved cruise and were committed to cruise, as soon as things settled down, they were going to go cruising again. Those that sat on the fence and weren't quite sure whether they were going to go cruising were probably sitting off the fence and weren't going to go cruising. Those that were never going to go cruising, we consider we're never going to go cruising. But since cruise has restarted, and I think it is due to the quite extensive health protocols that have been put in place in the sector, that shift has really changed. Those that were sitting on the fence are going to go cruising, and this new to cruise rate at 69% is enormous. So I don't know anyone in the room that's travelled overseas in the last 6 or 8 months? No? Okay, I can tell you, don't rush. It is fun, but it's problematic. It is really challenging between airline flight delays, lost baggage. From a service perspective, the world's not quite back to where it was from a tourism perspective, and the experiences aren't quite back to where they were. And the challenges of multiple country travel is really still quite difficult. So a lot of people are saying, the old adage of the saying that, hop on board a cruise ship, unpack your bag once and off you go, is actually even more obvious as a benefit at the moment. So there's 80 new ships on order. So a lot of people thought that during that downturn, the cruise industry was absolutely smashed in that 2.5 years. But they had massive assets that they could borrow on. So their debt levels, I'd hate to be their accountants, but their debt levels are through the roof, and it is going to take them a long time to recover. But because they did have such massive assets, they were able to borrow. So the new ship build order books really hasn't changed very much. And what we have actually seen is that a number of older ships that were getting towards their retirement age were retired a little bit earlier. And we're now seeing a really great modern, environmentally modern fleet of ships travelling around the world. So 80 new ships through to 2027. It's not very far away, 2027, when you think about it. 80 new ships, and 33% of those are actually going to be in the expedition market. So we are seeing a massive growth in that area. The lines that predominantly have ships on order are Carnival, MSC, Viking, Royal Caribbean and NCL. So in terms of the COVID, I know it's on people's minds, and I think the great thing I'm able to talk about is that the work that has been done in Australia and globally around the COVID conversation on cruise ships has been so extensive. So the Australian government set up a committee that I sit on, 12, 18 months ago. It was a very long and arduous start-up and conversation. But the Eastern Seaboard protocols were developed for the restart of cruise. Those protocols are going to remain in place for the entirety of this season. What we all know within communities is that things are changing every day around protocols and requirements. This morning I heard that New South Wales is actually dropping the mask requirement in cruise terminals to align with taxis, public transport and airports. So I don't know what the Tasmanian government's position is going to be on that at the moment, but what I do know is that the cruise lines have absolutely 100% committed to operating within the guidelines of each state and destination that they visit. What I can also tell you is that the guidelines, as I said, are very, very extensive, and it starts from the passenger leaving home to the passenger getting back home at the end of a cruise. The protocol started off with a colour-coded kind of traffic light system in terms of COVID numbers on board ships. We've now actually moved to a level 1, 2 and 3. It's very appropriate in its management. The Australian government is sticking with it for the moment, whilst other jurisdictions around the world have actually removed all requirements. So the CDC in America was, the driving force of the reporting and the protocols in America. There is now no requirement for cruise ships to report COVID cases, because there is no requirement in the rest of the community either. However, in Australia, we are sticking with it for the moment. Pre-testing for passengers going on board, so you get an option to do a PCR test within 72 hours or a RAT test within 12 hours. On board the ship, there's a whole lot of monitoring going on. Clearly, if you are symptomatic and unwell, people are taking really great responsibility for themselves and announcing that, but the crew are very in tune of working out, who's not feeling well and making sure that they head down to the doctors to get a test. For those that have been on a cruise ship pre-COVID, they were the biggest cleaners in the world. Everywhere you go and everywhere you touch, there's cleaning. That's even more exacerbated now. Every restaurant that you enter, there's full sanitisation and a whole range of protocols. Mask wearing is at this stage still required on embarkation and disembarkation, and then it will be up to each state. But I believe at level 1, which all 3 cruise ships in the country at the moment cruising are within level 1, doesn't require mask wearing outside on board the ships. But if you're in a position where you can't socially distance, then mask wearing is recommended. Not compulsory, but recommended. So it is a very holistic door-to-door strategy. What I can tell you since the restart in Australia, that there has been no requirement from any cruise passenger to rely on a destination's health system if they've had COVID. And I think that's the key element for the health authorities, where they were very concerned that a cruise ship could arrive in a destination and overwhelm the current health system. In the US, that has not been the case, and in fact Carnival reported that they had, during that Omicron peak last Christmas, with 600,000 passengers that they took on board their ships, there was one 94-year-old man that ended up in the ship's ICU. That was it. So the ships also are required by the Australian government to carry antivirals. So you probably can't get an antiviral in Hobart today if you went trying to get one, but you'll be able to get one on board a cruise ship. So good place to go on holiday, I reckon. So managing the crew, compulsory vaccination. There is an ongoing debate around vaccination everywhere, but at the moment you need to be up to date with your vaccination to go on a cruise in Australia. So that means if you are eligible for your second booster, you need to have had your second booster. And the government is sticking with a 95%, so a 5% variance to cater for people that aren't able to be vaccinated or for children under the age of 12. So there is a very small tolerance level of unvaccination on board cruise ships. So hopefully that answers lots of the questions that did come through in terms of COVID. I think the realisation is that we need to continue to be very flexible around this. I think the rules and regulations from a community perspective are changing all the time, but I do think that this entire season we will see the current Eastern Seaboard protocols staying in place for cruise. It's moving on to being a fairly, mundane topic that you need to cover, but I think that cruise is going to come out of this very well at the end of the day. In terms of partnerships, Australian Cruise Association has been really strong with its partnerships over the years. Cruise Lines International Australasia is definitely someone that an association that we work very closely with. They represent all the cruise lines themselves. It's good to have two bodies because a destination's perspective on some issues is quite different to a cruise line's perspective. But during this COVID time, the two associations have been able to work so well together in putting forward the strong arguments with government to getting cruise to restart. Tourism Australia. We've always had a close relationship with Tourism Australia, but as I mentioned before, we'd never actually managed to get cruise being discussed in that overall tourism offering conversation. And I know that Dom is presenting shortly after me by video, and he will be talking a little bit more about a three-way partnership that we've just entered into between Clare, Tourism Australia and the ACA. And we're going to be developing some promotional material around iconic cruises of Australia. We're going to be doing a lot of more work with Tourism Australia in the familiarisation programs and media programs. The Australian Cruise Association has about 90 members and me, with a little bit of other admin support thrown in here or there. So to actually have some support now within TA from a resource perspective is going to be enormous for me. And Dom is going to show a video that we managed to get together just before our conference, and I actually phoned Pip Harrison in the morning with a tear in my eye having watched it, and I hope that you feel strong and emotionally proud of the video that's about to be shown to you, because it's about showing how important cruise is to a range of different businesses. And I know I keep talking about it. I know you're probably all the converted as well, in terms of how broad the touch points of cruise are, in terms of whether it's the farmers, whether it's the transport operators, whether it's guides, whether it's... accommodation is actually one of the major beneficiaries of the cruise economics. And people probably go, to Hobart being a predominantly transit port, not quite so, but as that expedition market grows and there's more home porting here, then the whole accommodation piece comes into place. Most people, I think it's average, if you're a domestic passenger, will spend, how they get 1.5 nights, but around 1.5 nights in a hotel pre or post a cruise, and internationals are staying 3 and 4 nights. And I think with the airline challenges globally, I don't think anyone's mad to turn up to a destination to go and do anything on the day that you turn up now, because you're unlikely to either get there on time, and you might be down to H&M getting a bag full of clothes if you do. So hopefully, whilst I want the airline industry to get itself back together, but hopefully people will actually spend a little bit more time in their travel and arrive in destinations and spend a little bit more time pre and post as well, which is great for everyone. We also work really closely with New Zealand Cruise Association and Fiji, New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea is also a member, and it's, it takes for everybody to support each other for our region to be successful. In terms of growth for Australia, I hope that we continue on this global growth with everyone else. We are still challenged by Sydney and its berthing capacities. So when we talk about, I think Tasports is going to talk about this season coming back nice and strongly. But in terms of that high trajectory, we still have some capacity limitations within Australia to really meet those. The Brisbane International Cruise Terminal has been a great asset to the country, but in a way is probably going to support those northern itineraries a little bit more than the southern ones down to Tasmania. So we really need to keep pushing for Sydney to get another berth. As I mentioned before, one of the good things that's come out of COVID is that there's been some retirement of older ships, but there's also been a bit of downtime for the cruise industry to look at what's really important, and they've been on the trajectory of environmental sustainability and improvement for a very long time, and it is something that I think as supporters of the cruise sector we need to talk a little bit more about. And I'm going to share the link, because there's an online link to a great new brochure that's been put out with Claire, talking about the initiatives, talking about the new fuel options, talking about reduced emissions, talking about recycling on board, and the range of sustainability projects that the cruise industry is engaging on. One of those is around destination management. And I'm going to finish in terms of talking about, in Tasmania, that's a list of ACA members that I represent, with a view of growing and developing the cruise industry for increasing the economic benefits to destinations, but also the social benefits as well. destination management is a really hot topic everywhere, not just in the cruise sector, but in all tourism conversations. And I think it's a really great conversation to have, but I do think we need to have it in the right way. And I think I'm really encouraging all of us to make sure that we stand up and as strong and speak loudly in support of the cruise sector, because it does offer some wonderful economic benefits. You're all here predominantly for that. It offers some wonderful social benefits. The work that the cruise lines are doing globally in community projects, in reef sustainability projects, there's such a capacity with their loyal followers for us to continue to develop all of those opportunities. So thank you for your time, and I'll be on the panel for any questions later.
Thank you very much, Jill, and we're lucky to have you as a Sandy Bay resident and a Tassie girl, and we can clearly tell Jill's passion for the cruise sector. So one of the questions that did come up there was about face masks in the terminal. It's the same procedures as it is now with the airport. It's a personal decision, and so it's up to the individual person if they want to wear a mask in the terminal, exactly the same as the airport. The only mandatory requirements are those that are close contacts or COVID cases. Thank you, Jill. So we're now going to hear from Dominic Merling from Tourism Australia.
G'day everyone, so good to be here today with you, albeit virtually. I'm coming to you live or semi-live, I was live, I guess, from Gadigal and Wongal lands in Sydney, New South Wales. A lot of you would be wondering, why is Tassie not on your states there, Dominic? Well, I'm not lucky enough to look after you guys. I am lucky enough to wear a cruise hat, but most of you would be more familiar with my delightful colleague, Kristy. All right, so today I'm going to take you through just some high-level insights from an exciting piece of research that we have coming out called The Future of Demand. This is a research piece where we basically went out to, I think, 24,000 odd travellers and asked them, hey, what experiences are you into? And we're going to have the full report by the end of the year, like a very data-heavy Christmas present, so maybe don't gift that to your loved ones necessarily. And cruise forms a part of that. So take this as a sneak peek, because basically the whole research thing is so big, we're still kind of trying to figure out how to communicate it in a way where people's brains don't go. So here we go. Before I do kick off, though, I should say most of you would be familiar with TA, but a little bit of a refresher. So we're all about inbound. We sit sort of at that federal government umbrella level. I would say we provide that big overarching message that then everyone else filters in through. But very simply, our vision is to make Australia the most desirable and memorable place on earth. Desirability, it's about first-time visitation. Memorability, it's actually about getting people coming back. So that's where that amazing dispersal happens and people stay a bit longer and see a bit more and that sort of thing. However, cruising is going to play such an important part in tourism recovery. Like, yes, when we look at all the numbers, they're trending in the right direction, but what we really want is we also want to be able to open up to effectively travellers that might not otherwise have considered Australia before. And I think that's where cruising is such an important one. When you look at cruising, fiercely loyal, first ones to sort of almost come back in many regards, and everyone just, took the extra credits and rebooked onto new cruises and that sort of thing. So a really kind of cool cohort in terms of that loyalty in regard to that. Some of our research, it's been interesting because it has shown that cruise is a very sort of rewarding and evocative experience for travellers. So you see sort of the different opinions here and what sort of different people are looking for. This US traveller, says the cruise gives me a chance to explore multiple destinations, try different food, see a variety of landscapes, and have a relaxing time with family and loved ones. So very much sort of that exploration side of things. And then the Indian traveller, swimming, casinos, making new friends and shopping makes this even more exciting. Enjoying every bit of it. Me and my husband watching the sea while holding hands in day and night is my favourite pastime. We won't ask the husband what his favourite pastime is, but so it shows a very, different sort of mindset when people are consuming their cruise as an experience as well. So that's something interesting to think about as products in terms of these behaviors that you can actually tap into. When you look at the interest in cruising, here's a graph. So the top little line is really all about where does it rank in terms of a desirable experience out of the 89 experiences that these travelers were effectively polled on. And you see here that realistically it sits within sort of the top 25% for each of the actual markets as well. So, polling really, really highly for some of these countries in particular. Then the numbers on the left corresponding to the bars, that's really, I guess, what that potential market size is when you start extrapolating the data out of there. So you see sort of big numbers out of the US and China. I don't think US particularly surprises anyone. That tends to be sort of who you think of when you think of a traditional cruise visitor. But then really great potential out of markets like, Canada, South Korea, Japan, the UK, and then, of course, Australians as well. From a domestic perspective, I think we're all pretty comfortable with the fact that Australians do love a good cruise. Unfortunately, a lot more outbound. So it's how can we get them, staying in Australia and then doing the pre and post stay. And that's with all of us. It's really how can we get these people staying longer? So doing the cruise around Australia. So yes, it has the shore excursions, the port visits, but how can we do the pre and post to get them to really spend on the mainland experience, or rather on the land experiences as well. Now, people that cruise, what else are they actually interested in? What you see here is really the affinity for other experiences. So the top 10 other things that cruisers or travelers that like cruising want to do. Unsurprisingly, marine experiences do feature quite heavily as part of these. But what's also great is that it shows people want to get that little bit more in depth as well. So yes, you've got your aerial perspectives on things, your charter flights, but full driving actually comes off there, off-roading. So when you get out and about, theatre and performing arts, and then that links in closely to Indigenous performances, which is fantastic to see because that is such a priority for Tourism Australia. And I know that the industry is really getting behind helping to share the stories of the world's oldest living culture. Interestingly enough, depending on what size of vessel that you are actually on, that changes sort of what else you're interested in as well. So when you break it down into sort of small vessel versus a larger vessel, small vessels are really all about exploring. So it is things like, visiting Indigenous sites and communities. It's about, little workshops, hands-on type things, exploring the wilderness. Whereas a larger ship tends to be a little bit more sort of sensory, those softer touch things. So whether it's the spa treatments, the tasting trails, the wine, beer and liquor pairings with food. So, I'd almost say these are sort of the hedonistic ones as well. So with sort of this information, I hope that really kind of helps you to think a little bit about, as cruise ships start coming in and, as the sort of international visitors start to arrive on these, this season and also for future years, I guess, how can the experiences that we offer as an industry effectively tailor to these people that are choosing cruise as their way of coming to Australia? In regards to what we're doing more broadly in the cruise space, so we're really keen to continue sharing, what are some of those iconic cruise experiences around Australia, and obviously all with the goal, as mentioned, of extending that pre and post as well, and really getting people to open their wallets as much as possible while they're here. We're doing some extra research into that space as well, and including, the wider economic impact of cruising. We'll continue to work through the Aussie Specialist program to promote Australia as a cruising destination, and are actually getting to assist us with completely revamping that cruise module as well to really sell Australia as a cruise destination and wider destination in the most optimal way. And then really looking forward to continuing our partnership as well with ACA and CLIA as well. And with that, I hope that provides you a little bit of an insight into what's going on in the mind of a cruiser or a potential cruiser even. If you haven't already, check out our Working with Tourism Australia guide, subscribe to our newsletters. You'll see that's not my details, that's Kristy, because Kristy is absolutely amazing. So do please reach out to her with any TA questions that you have, but also don't be afraid to come to me with any other questions as well. With that, I really wanted to leave you with a little video that we've put together on just why cruising is so important for the Australian visitor economy. All the best with the rest of the day. Thank you.
The benefits of cruising reach our regions and remote communities right around Australia, bringing a dispersal of economic benefits beyond the major cities. Prior to COVID, cruise was a multi-billion-dollar industry and a significant part of the visitor economy for many communities around our coastline. Pre-pandemic, there were around 300,000 international visitors cruising in Australia.
Before COVID, Australia had the highest market penetration for cruise in the world. Australians love to cruise, and international visitors love to cruise in Australia. And it delivers a really rich and dynamic contribution to our economy.
There's a range of ways that each destination benefits from cruise. When people book a cruise, they could pre-book their shore excursions. If you've been on the ship for a while, you might want to get off, explore. What ShoreX does is it takes people away from the coastal perimeters and gives them more of a dispersal opportunity.
We know that for every cruise ship passenger that lands in our region, they spend at least $500 on shore each trip.
And so when we see a large ship of 2,000 to 2,500 people, we see they spend in town of around $500,000 on the day.
Cruise delivers more than $5 billion in economic impact to the Australian economy each year, and that's everything from the travel agents, the tour operators, the ports and destinations right around our coast, and the farmers who deliver the thousands of tonnes of food and beverage to those ships each year.
We're really fortunate now because Australia has a full suite of the cruise ship markets. So all of the global cruise lines are now here. So there really is an itinerary to suit everybody's desires and needs. And that's a really attractive thing for international visitors.
Our location, as you can see, only 12 minutes away from the harbour, means that when there are ships in port, we see significant spikes, not only in guests coming through to the zoo, but we find that our tour products sell out, and we also see significant increases in retail purchases throughout the site.
Cruise tourism is extremely important to Phillip Island. Every guest who visits, their money goes back into all the great conservation work that we do across our island.
Cruise ships arrive in our magnificent deep harbour at Port Arthur. We find visitors, especially international travellers, are really proud to know that they're contributing to keeping these sites for future generations.
It's a massive opportunity where we get to share our culture through this cruise industry sector. So we're excited and been working with a lot of the prepackaged agents. Matter of fact, we've only just had bookings about those same agents who were booking us before, reactivated all again. So we're all very excited about that, and we're hoping to increase.
We see a very strong future for cruise in Broome, and we already see that with expedition ships next year. We already have 79 calls for Broome. In the scheme of things, that is quite significant.
We need all ships to rise, no pun intended, and we do believe that the best time lays ahead.
We've started to see cruising begin to bounce back, with demand for cruising in Australia strong. Cruising provides economic benefits that spread deep into the economy and supports more than 18,000 Australian jobs. Australia is a spectacular destination for cruise visitors.
Thank you, Dominic. He can't hear us, but and we're delighted that Dominic and Tourism Australia could record that for this particular session today. And Aletta, thank you for setting that up off the back of the ACA conference the other day. So it was a great insight from Tourism Australia, and we're really delighted for that. So we're going to start getting further and further into the nitty-gritty now of how do we work with the sector and what's happening this year. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Aletta Macdonald from Tourism Tasmania.
Go for green. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Alex has asked me today to talk specifically about the SHORE program and how to work with the SHORE programs. So that's what I'm going to cover. So we've just heard in the TA presentation that really cruise is not one market. It's quite varied. There's all sorts of different visitors, different types of visitors that take a cruise or come to Australia or cruise in Australia, whether they be domestic or international. But there's also, I mean, we kind of saw there was even a fairly distinct difference between what big ship cruisers and what small ship cruisers wanted to do, what kind of experiences they were after. But within those different cruise categories, there are more nuances than that. So one of my key messages today, I hope you take it with you, is that cruise is not one visitor market. The passenger demographics are also changing, and I think the TA research, when it's released at the end of the year, will probably help us understand that even better. Travelling as a couple, the empty nester couple has been a fairly key passenger group for a very long time, but actually it's the younger cruisers that are the fastest growing group at the moment. Those millennials seem to really enjoy cruising as a mode to take their holiday. Families as well are seeing cruising as meeting multiple needs. So we're seeing more and more of the multi-generational travel. And the other thing about passengers on cruises, they do tend to book a fair way ahead. And they also have quite a lot of loyalty to the brands that they book with. So if I do go back one, so within the different categories, each of these different brands are trying to find a niche in their market. They're trying to differentiate themselves for their passengers. So you will see quite strong alignment and loyalty to somebody like Pennant, which is a kind of luxury expedition vessel, very different to the kind of client that you might find on a Coral Expeditions vessel, which is probably more likely to have a scientific background, someone who's really looking at understanding geology or wildlife or birds, whereas a Pennant visitor is probably a professional, they're probably a high net worth individual, they want luxury, they want a small group, and they want some wilderness and wildlife, but they don't necessarily want to get into the level of depth around, I guess, the place findings as someone on a Coral Expedition. It's the same with, in the middle of the small luxury category, those who might jump on a Europa vessel from Hapag-Lloyd are more likely to be Germans. They're really heavy in that market, whereas a Viking might be from another part of Europe and an Azamara might be more of an American market. So the key point to this slide, I think, is that what we really want as a destination is a pretty varied and dispersed shore program. We need lots of different things to fill up our activity schedule for what is a growing market for Tasmania. But it doesn't fit everybody. So the first thing to ask yourself is the cruise market right for you? One of the things that I often hear is that it can be unreliable, and in the sense that some ships don't come at the time they're advertised they're going to come, the shore tours have to change. It is important to understand that flexibility is going to be required if you work in this sector. Tasmania is usually part of a bigger itinerary, and there are lots of factors that are outside the cruise line's control that can impact on arrival times, cancellations, things like that. So flexibility is really important. Also, are you set up for groups? Is your business geared towards groups, or is it something that your business can do? A lot of Tasmania's product is really designed for an FIT market. It always has been. That's been our core market. So it can be difficult for operators to think about how would I manage a group. One of the messages that came through really strongly at the last session that we did, when we had Bob Wood in the room and Claire and Carnival, was that the cruise industry at the moment really understands that every destination is struggling with restart, every destination is struggling with workforce. Capabilities have changed in the destinations that they visit. So now is a really good time to examine what you offer and think, what can I offer really reliably? And maybe set some staging or some staggering, different group sizes. It's up to you to be able to say 2 different lines. Like before COVID, maybe I took 50 passengers in 2 groups of 25. Now I can take 3 groups of 10, and I want to stage them out across the day. So that kind of examination of what you offer and how you offer it is really important to do. Obviously, it's a very, very seasonal market. It only really operates in Tasmania from October to April. And it does have a very long booking window, and that can be a challenge for operators too, particularly if you're taking group bookings and allotments 2 years ahead, and that means then that you have other bookings that you can't take. So that's something to think about. And of course, a big portion of this sector are international travellers. So knowing that you can cope with those needs of the international travellers, particularly around language and cultural needs, is important. So how does it actually work? It's a pretty simple system, really. Obviously, passengers make a booking with their cruise line. The cruise line will have a contract with a shore excursion operator, which are essentially international tour operators, or ITOs as we call them. They can be called a ground handler. They do go by other names. But when we refer to Shore X, we're talking about the companies that are contracted to deliver the shore tour program. They would then contract the tourism product in the destination, and you would deliver your product to the passenger. That system also works for feedback. If passengers have feedback on a tour that they have, they will tell the cruise line, who will tell the shore excursion operator, who will tell you. So it can take a little while to get that feedback through. It's also a relationship. Those contracts, there's really the 4 operators that you can see listed here are the ones that operate in Australia, and they have very close relationships with the cruise lines. Prior to COVID, the contracting tended to happen every 12 to 24 months, but my understanding is that they're looking to really push that out to a longer contract, 3 or 4 years with each shore operator. And the shore operators are also starting to sort of specialise as well a little bit. So in the same way that you would develop a relationship with an inbound tour operator, that's what is required to work with shore excursion programs. The other key thing that is different to working with a normal wholesaler, international wholesaler or inbound tour operator is that shore excursion operators do not really want to buy directly out of your brochure or off your website. What they want to do is have a product that is tailored to them. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do some, really big change to your product. It's about inclusions and how it's delivered. And the way that they mostly do that is actually how they package you with different operators on one itinerary. So, you might normally be packaged with your neighbours or your neighbouring attractions. A shore excursion operator might package you with somebody else, in the city or out into a different region, depending on how they want to pull together their itineraries. And they do this so that they don't directly compete with you in your normal market, with you for passengers once they've arrived, or even pre-booking independent passengers. It also means, though, that you can offer a net rate. As an ITO, most of the time the shore excursion operators are going to be looking for 25 to 30% commission. What I have found, and my feedback that I've had from operators, is that it is much easier for industry to cope if they make nuances within their product and offer out a net rate. These are very text-heavy slides, which I'm not going to go all the way through, but I've put them on there because they sort of form the basis of an industry guide that we're looking to put out to help operators work in this sector. So I think this slide pretty much covers what I've just said already, really. Let me just see here. I think it's probably important to note that the shore excursion program is really, really important to cruise lines. It is one of their key revenue streams. It's one of the key ways that our destination derives value from this sector as well. So as we work to try and increase the value of the cruise sector, the shore excursion program and its inclusions will be the place that we spend lots of our time concentrating. And then the other dot points there are really some quick and easy things. Obviously, rates need to be competitive and consistent. Validity dates, cancellation charges, those are all normal things that you would do in any other sector, and you should absolutely do them for cruise shipping as well. So if you are talking to shore excursion operators around contracting, child fees, payment policies, minimum maximum capacity, block-out dates, all of those things that you would normally include in a wholesale program, you should absolutely have very clear for these programs as well. The main difference might be the free of charge policy for guides. It's very common that attractions and tours would apply an FOC for every 10 or 15 paying passengers so that the guide can come on board. Tips for tours. This is, we started to look at sort of what are those key things that the market is seeking, how have things changed a little bit, cruise experiences. The programs are getting more and more varied. So what we're seeing in destination programs all around the world, I think, is more tours for smaller groups. So instead of having 7 or 8 tours in a destination, there might be 20. And so we're getting a higher dispersal on the ground, which is really great. The Aboriginal-led experiences and that connection to country, that sense of welcome and belonging is a really of high interest to international cruise visitors, just as it is to all international visitors to Australia. Authentic moments to increase that connection to people and produce, the Meet the Maker experiences, hands-on cooking classes, craft workshops, tastings, all of those things are also very high up the list. Food and drink, obviously, are super important to how you experience a destination. And it can be a little challenging, particularly if you have, weather events and things like that. So building cancellation fees and conditions in around food is really important to protect yourselves. But also the way you talk about a food offering is important. So if you have a vessel that's on a round-the-world trip and they're making lots of stops, lunch, for example, a lunch inclusion may many times in the itinerary be a sit-down option. So if yours is not a sit-down option, you might just want to describe it differently. You might want to call it a tasting platter or something like that. So it's important to include those food experiences, but you do need to set expectations. So the way that you word things, and it's not just about food, but the way that you word your experience is really important. Sustainability is an interesting one as well. Sustainability is something that I think the cruise industry knows it needs to really talk a lot about. It has lots of plans for, but it's not well understood for cruise and what they're doing in sustainability. However, if you take it from a visitor's perspective, cruise visitors are similar to every other kind of visitor that's coming to Australia, and even domestic visitors, in that their awareness of sustainable travel practices is much higher, and their desirability to do that. So showcasing your sustainable and socially responsible elements is important for this market as well. And of course, 90 minutes of travel from the port is about the limit for a full day tour. So as the shore excursion operators package up itineraries, you'll find a full sort of 7 or 8 hour program won't have more than 90 minutes there and back elements of travel. It just doesn't work otherwise. Shorter tours are often more popular, they're easier to sell, so there's more and more half and 2/3 day options coming in. One of the things that Alex didn't mention, though, was that we have this season 25% of our visits are overnighters. So those longer itineraries are easier, and also the evening experiences are really important. I won't go through all of these things. These are, again, they're sort of coming through that TA research. Wilderness, wildlife, landscapes are really important. Walking tours are becoming more and more popular. Again, they're seen as more sustainable. It's easier to do social distancing. There's no vehicle transportation. It's usually small groups, and the use of audio technology can solve some of the international language needs as well. Wellness is important. The wellness experiences are becoming more and more sought after. That's a sort of meditation, mindfulness. It lends itself really closely to the walking experiences as well. The local economy contribution, visitors are actively looking to know that they're contributing directly into the local economy. And that shift towards out of the kind of urban centres and into the rural lends itself to what we're doing in agritourism. Those kind of agritourism experiences in our regions are very, very popular for shore excursion programs. So what do you do and who do you talk to? These are the three, there was 4 before, AOT was included as well, but these are the 3 main shore excursion operators in Australia, and certainly the ones that deal with 95% of Tasmania's cruise visits. So the Bob Wood Cruise Group, Carmen there is the General Manager of Operations. She's your first port of call. Now, I would suggest if you want to talk to the cruise, the shore excursion operators, that you just reach out, send them an email with your offering. Don't badger them with lots and lots of emails, but send them an email. They're trying to stand up every single port in Australia at the moment. They're trying to recontract all of the product that they had. They're very, very busy, but they are actively seeking and wanting to hear from you. So if you have a product that you think would work in this market, then absolutely send these guys an email with your information. Bob Wood currently have the contracts for Carnival, P&O, Princess, Holland America Line, Cunard, and probably some others as well. And they are part of the Bob Wood South Pacific Group, which is the overarching company, global tour specialists. So they run a coach operation around Australia as well, and group touring. The same with Intercruisers. Again, I've put James Coughlin's details there. They generally service more of that mid-market ship, the Viking. They do Royal Caribbean. They have MSC as well for us this year, and they are part of the TUI Group, which is one of the biggest global travel companies in the world, with 400 hotels, and they own Hapag-Lloyd. Is that right too? Yeah, they actually are the owner of the Europa when it comes to visit us, and they have various online sales agents and all sorts of things going on. And Acorn, they look at servicing more of the small ships, so the Pennant, Azamara, and they're part of the Abercrombie and Kent group, which you might also be contracted through for international product. So I guess reach out to them. If you need their details, Alex will have them. They are seeking product. They want to work with you. They will have requirements as well. So the same way that you would have a requirement of who it is that you want to work with in your business, these guys are going to look for things like safety audits and sustainability policies and all of those things that the supply chain is concerning itself with. Other ways to get involved: small group private touring, both contracted through the shore excursion programs and independently, is having absolutely a rise at the moment. There is a contingent of passengers who will prefer to make their own arrangements, and they will find your product online. For these passengers, it's very, very important that they understand that you can get them back to the vessel on time when they need to be back. And not all vessels depart at the same time. So while we see a lot of them heading out in the early evening, it's really important to know what's on the cruise schedule if you're taking independent tour bookings. Pre and post, I think Jill's already spoken about. The expedition season for Tasmania does have a growing number of these turnarounds. So we need to make the most of those in pre and post touring, which can not only be accommodation offerings, but perhaps multi-night packaging. The evening activities, this is a sector that we're not doing so well in, and I think Alex might talk a little bit more about. We have an opportunity, particularly over the summer, because we have this long twilight, to really offer some great evening activities that aren't found in any other destination, and we haven't yet really nailed this market, and yet our 25% of all our visits are going to stay overnight. So there's a real opportunity for us, I think, to derive some value out of some evening activities. And guiding is the other way that you can be involved. We're really looking for any kind of quality step-on guides. So if you're interested in that, then I would also reach out to the shore excursion operators with your information. I think that's it. I don't think I had any more.
Thank you very much, Aletta. That's great. So just before I introduce Scott, because we're a lot of information coming your way, I just want you to quickly all stand up and say one interesting fact to the person next to you, and then sit straight back down. Up you get. Head back down. That's enough. Head back down. That's enough, everyone. Sit back down and be quiet. Poor old Dave. Throw these things in there. Never ask a group of tourism operators to start talking. They'll never stop. So a bit of energy back in the room. And again, I'd like to thank Scott for stepping in at last minute to help Kristy Little from Tasports out. So we're going to hear operational aspects of the season. Thank you very much, Scott Wilcox.
Instructions. Thanks very much, Alex. Spokesperson for Kristy today. I think she's just faking it, but I won't go there. Just wanted to kick off if I could, please. So the Hobart cruise ship is scheduled to start at the end of October, with 69 cruise ships currently booked to call over the season, capable of carrying just over 114,000 passengers and 49,000 crew. 21 of these ships will stay overnight in Hobart. There will be 14 calls which involve 2 cruise ships into the port at the same time. Very challenging days for me from an operational point of view. And 20 of these ships will be arriving internationally after a cruising to Hobart from New Zealand. Again, a lot of more controls in place for those vessels as well. In terms of the makeup of the ships, interesting to note, only a small percentage of the overall calls are by ships carrying more than 3,000 passengers. That's just under 16% or 11 calls. The majority of the ships are less than 1,000 passengers, nearly half, and just over a third of the ships are carrying 1,000 to 3,000 passenger range. So a little bit of a decrease there. Slide 2 just gives you a breakdown of when the busy periods are. This gives me an opportunity to book my holidays. You can see from the slides, the majority of cruise ships will be calling between the summer peak between December and February, and 2/3 of the total ships calls will be during this period. November also being very busy in terms of passengers. 3/4 of the total of the 114,000 forecast cruise passengers arrive will be between the months of November and February. From a Port Arthur perspective, the cruise ship season starts the day after Hobart in late October. There are 24 cruise ships calls currently scheduled for the season, carrying almost 41,000 passengers and over 17,000 crew. In terms of the ship size, the majority of the ships will be in the small to mid-range size categories. 38% of the ships will be less than 1,000 passengers. 46%, or nearly half of all arrivals, will be within the 1,000 to 3,000 passenger range, and just 4 ships will be above the 3,000 passengers. So again, the slide just giving an indication from the graphs. With the season extended from late October through to March, Port Arthur will also see a peak of the cruise ship calls over the summer months, particularly between November and February. Almost 3/4 of the cruise ship calls will be in these months. Passengers follow a similar trend. Over half of the cruising passengers arrive will be in November to December. So some of the seasonal highlights. The return of the cruise ships after a 2-year hiatus and the commencement of the 2023 cruise ship season is scheduled to officially start on the 25th of October, not that far away, with the arrival of the Pacific Explorer to Hobart on Tuesday the 25th of October. This same vessel will then sail to Port Arthur the following day on the 26th of October. In terms of the highlights for the season, we look forward to welcoming new luxury liner the Windstar Cruises to Tasmania with the Star Breeze, which carries just over 300 passengers. The line has 3 voyages planned for this season, the first in which is a cycling charter around the state. Over New Year's Eve, luxury vessel Ponat, carrying 184 passengers, has a 4-day port call booked to Hobart. We have a number of maiden cruise ship vessels visiting the south of the state this season, including Quantum of the Seas, Star Breeze, Westerdam, Pacific Adventurer, Viking Mars, Zutadam, La Solola, might have got the one wrong, and Celebrity Eclipse. The season is due to finish on the 4th of April where Nordam will depart Hobart. Additionally, we have the Coral Discoverer returning to the state to undertake its Tasmanian season, which involves the vessels home porting in Hobart for 7 turnaround tours between December and March this season. Now turning to some more of the operational information, the Macquarie 2-ship terminal will again be used for processing all arriving cruise ship passengers and crew. The terminal will look very similar to the pre-COVID in terms of services offered, and we're looking to working with the various stakeholders and retailers to prepare for this season. These services include a visitor information desk, volunteers run meet and greet services, destinations advising the City of Hobart signage, retailers including the market and jewellery store holders, as well as the amenities, free Wi-Fi for passengers and crew, and processing space for Border Force, immigration and quarantine. The next few slides cover the parking. What have I done here? Is that right? Hang on. What have I done there, Kristy? Thank you. So the next few slides give you parking arrangements. Go to that. For the coming season. As I said, we can show where the shore exit arrangements will be. Oops. So where's my button gone, Alec?
The green flashing light button.
Yeah. Here we go. So showing the shore excursion arrangements for the buses for the season to accommodate the passengers and for tour operators. And we have a independent little lay-down area as well for 5 to 10 minute areas, a taxi area as well, our smaller Destination Southern Tasmania operators to operate from, and other key landmarks within the area as well. So all cruise ship passengers landing in Hobart are all operated by shipping agents. The majority of the ships were handled by either Inchcape or Will Houndsman, and with GAC just handling one vessel this year, Europa. And we have independent, they have included their offices and email references as well, so you can see all the different agents which are operating and looking after each vessel. All cruise ships arriving can be viewed on the Tasports website. Following the link to the cruise ship page, click on the statewide cruise ship link below. There's another slide I'll go to in a moment to show you that, which will give you a lot more information in regards to the cruise ship schedule for this season. Just to note, we're in the process of updating all our operational information relating to the cruise ship season on the website. This will be updated in the weeks before the first cruise ship arrival and should be the first point of reference for any queries around the season. Pick-up or operations arrangements can be made as well. So you can see the website here as well. This is the Tasports website at the moment. Just gives you a bit of an indication how to break it down and get a lot more detail. I think I might have missed a couple of slides there, Kristy, but yes. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with everybody throughout the season, and hopefully we have a bumper year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. We'll probably have some questions a little bit later about some operational stuff inside the terminal, but that will come. Now I'd like to welcome Adi Munshi from the Tasmanian Travel and Information Centre to the stage.
Morning, everyone. My name's Adi, and I've been managing the Tasmanian Travel and Information Centre, City of Hobart, since October of last year. Before I get going, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of the land at which we meet. At the TTIC, we acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania, and more specifically, the Moonina people who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture, and rights. We recognize that we have much to learn from them and they represent the world's oldest continuing culture. We pay our sincere respects to elders past and present and to all Aboriginal people living in and around Nipaluna. So, well, I've probably met most of you, but if I haven't so far, happy to meet after the presentation today. And in terms of this cruise ship season, we're looking to improve the entire overall offering, not only from a passenger experience, but also from an operator experience, and more on that to come later. In terms of our role of the TTIC, short for the Travel Centre, we're the Gateway Visitor Centre for Hobart, and has always been the role. Being in the heart of Hobart, we're here to support and promote tourism in all forms. Our aim is to be the face on the ground and the face of industry, help visitors to have a quintessential Tassie experience. So we're here to promote all operators, no matter how small or how big. And on that note, all my experience for the past 15 years or so has been luxury hospitality, so hotels that really small inventory, so dealing with 20 up to 40, 80 people maximum, so quite green to the whole cruise shipping industry. But I have been told that I'm in for one hell of a roller coaster ride. So looking at thousands of people, queues around the travel center, profanities, all of that. So I'm just getting prepared for what's due to come my way. Of course, big role of the travel center is regional dispersion. So we will continue on that, of course, and try our best as well with cruise shipping as well. So in terms of promoting tourism, the two sort of main ways that we will be doing that, of course, not only by speaking about your businesses and making bookings as well, but also we'll be reverting back to what the cruise ship arrivals guide, of course, making it a little modern in line with 2022. And we'll be going to print about 75,000 copies of the cruise ship arrivals guide, which has a map which most of you might be familiar, and also has where your businesses are located as well on the cruise ship arrivals guide. And these will be distributed to all the passengers coming off the ships. So we only have 3 spots available on the cruise ship arrival guide. So if you haven't gotten there, please feel free to meet me later and we can discuss the opportunity as well. The prices are up there, and we have actually sent out an EDM a few weeks ago. If you haven't received it, again, just feel free to reach out to me. We still have opportunities for your brochures at the cruise ship terminal at Mac 2. So that's another one as well. Since I've been on board, a lot of people have been asking me, are you guys still located on Davy Street? What's happening? So yes, we are still located at the corner of Davy and Elizabeth. So, and I have no plans to move that for the interim. There were plans which a lot of you guys know, to move over to the council centre, but I don't want to listen to people whinging about parking tickets. And, we have a happy bunch that come to the travel centre. They're looking to have a good time. So at least in my view, we'll try and keep that going for as long as we can. We also have the Elizabeth Street Mall Hub with Michelle Maynard's beautiful artwork, and that continues to be a great spot for visitors who don't make it all the way down to the travel centre or down to the waterfront, or even for local Tasmanians who simply want to get a bit of information on local touring, parking, and shops. So in terms of Mac 2 operations, so we're looking at streamlining procedures, no promises just yet, but we're looking at improving it from not only a passenger experience, but also from an operator's point of view as well. I understand back in the day when Alex and my predecessors were around, you'd be spent a spreadsheet where you could fill in, all your tours and, by time and etc. And then that would sort of be collated and filtered down to our volunteers, where we would put together one spreadsheet and share all, the what's on in terms of tours for the day. We're trying, and I say trying, and I'll get back to you by the end of the month with a formal email to get all information just through BookEasy. So make sure you have your tours loaded up in there, and that will interface, through your channel manager, through Resd or Livin or other channel managers that are there. And hopefully I can generate one report which can be shared. However, I think I reckon it'll probably be ready for next cruise ship season, so we'll probably have to revert to a Google spreadsheet or similar system. So just watch out for the news that I will update you on by the end of the month. And want to get the ball rolling, so I'll try and get back to you within the next week or so. We're also looking at improving the cruise ship passenger experience and looking to have more digital presence at the MAC2 cruise ship terminal. So that'll be in the form of screens, what's on, so when people get off the boat, they can see, we'll have some screens like a welcome screen for the passengers, also potentially, what touring options are there, and also better digital wayfinding and day tours. So that's still a work in progress, which I'm working on with my colleagues at City of Hobart. So, none of this would be possible, without the help of our volunteers who've been around and know more about cruising than I do for sure. And volunteers are so critically important, and kudos to every single one of them, not only within the City of Hobart, but also across the state, who make such an important contribution to our industry. So to all those who are here, we're deeply indebted to you, so thanks for all your time and dedication. I also want to give special thanks to Luke Kazeli, who's our City Welcome Volunteer Program Officer, who's helped bring back the volunteers and to bring on board the new wonderful volunteer team that we have. Both Luke and I are relatively new to our roles, so we're putting in our best efforts into showcasing not only Hobart, but Tassie to all visitors coming to our shores. We currently have about 130 volunteers in total, and we've had expressions of interest for about 30 to come back to MAC2 as well. And Alex already mentioned, and he stole my thunder there, but we do have them. We do have volunteers at our Davie Street Main Travel Centre, as well as at the Elizabeth Street Mall Hub, the Salamanca Markets, events, with City of Hobart, and just last week we resumed operations at the Hobart Airport as well. In terms of what the volunteers will do, it'll sort of go back to what it was, a few years ago when we had the cruise ships. So we are looking to start up back to meet the first cruise ship on the 25th of October. And the volunteer shifts will essentially be sort of throughout the day. So depending on what time the cruise ships come in, so there'll be a shift from morning till about midday, and then from midday till the afternoon. Of course, there may be additional shifts depending on demand, and we'll determine that as we go along. And in terms of the duties, that would essentially be that friendly Tassie face for all cruise ship passengers coming, helping with general inquiries, sort of general wayfinding as well, and distributing City of Hobart maps so people can get around, and the cruise ship arrivals guide. So that's in a nutshell what we'll be doing from the Travel Centre's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adi. That's brilliant. Right, I'll keep this nice and quick, and then we'll get stuck into the questions. And morning tea is about to arrive as well. So Destination Southern Tasmania do run a couple of opportunities as well. One, and this has all been transmitted out via EDMs, but for the recording, there's an opportunity to promote your product via poster advertising in the cruise terminal. It closes on September the 30th, so please get your application in for that one. They're large A0 core flute signs attached to what are commonly called the icebergs in the terminal. And as the cruise passengers come out of the terminal, they'll be fed through that area you can see up there and shown advertising on their way. And the other is the hawking and parking permit area, and this is an initiative that we put in place a few years ago to formalise the opportunity for independent tour operators to sell their wares to cruise passengers on the day. It's important to try to work out what works best in this space. You've got to understand to a certain extent that the cruise passengers that are stepping out of the terminal have been marketed at for the last however long since they've had their ticket, let's say 6 months. They've had marketing through the cruise lines and the shore excursion companies. They've had product put in front of them. They've decided not to book that. And we would encourage more product to get involved with the shore excursion companies, because the consumer trends are going that way. We're finding that consumers are buying more product now than before COVID directly from the shore excursion company. You can understand the thinking there. They want to try to keep everything in one place for a bit of safety. So those passengers have decided not to take a shore excursion tour. They've also decided not in the last 6 months to do their own research and pre-book something. So those passengers that do step off into the terminal, we would call free and independent travellers. They have actively not sought something out. So what tends to work best in the hawking area is people offering products that can bend to the desires of the passengers as they arrive. So we find that group tours of sort of, let's say a family of 4 or 5 or 6 people are interested to going on a tour, including, and a lot of the time they're swayed in where they want to go by what has been promoted to them on the ship anyway. So they've been exposed to products that are sold on the ship. Maybe that's Bonorong, maybe it's a city tour, maybe it's a loop bus, maybe it's the mountain. So those are in their minds. So those are the kind of things that work best in that hawking area down there. But it's an area that's sectioned aside. It's in the flow of the passengers. It's to make it look professional. You get a parking space in that area. You get a desk in an area to set up and promote your wares to those passengers as they go. Applications are currently open, have been for a while, and close on the 30th of September. Successful operators will be granted a permit. And I also wanted to touch very briefly on a potential opportunity that may arise during the season. We're still investigating this with Ardy and with the City of Hobart and with Carnival Cruises about the opportunity to sell product directly in the terminal through the Tasmanian Travel and Information Centre. There's a bit to play out in that area, but it's important for me to raise that, especially in the hawking permit area, because we don't know exactly how those two things will interact. But if you are interested in that and have questions about that, please contact myself or Ardy as we go. So the hawking area, as Scott mentioned, you're right, there you go, is in this area. Well, I can't even see this. Where am I looking? That's the parking area. That's the parking area. There you go. That's the water. That's the parking area on Hunter Street. And this is Mac 1 just here. This is the forecourt of Mac 1. And this area is where you can set up a table with some signage to promote your product to the passengers. But any questions about that, please let me know. Now, this is an important message that I've been asked to convey by 2 or 3 different operators within the region currently, and this does play out especially for independent tour operators, but also for bus trips. It's the importance of making sure that you let all product know that you're coming with your passengers during the season. What we know as an industry is that the most difficult constraint we have at the moment is workforce, especially regionally. The workforce that we do have are overworked, and as we head into a peak season where the increase in consumers will play out in those regional businesses, pressure will be on those people to deal with them. And what's playing out already, we're seeing, as we start to increase in visitation, is stress on those staff when they don't expect people to come. So all we're asking for you to do is to remember this as a consumer yourself, but also as an operator. If you're taking a tour bus or a group of people to an area, even if it's only a cafe, let them know you're coming. Because if you don't let them know you're coming, don't be expected to receive negative feedback yourself if the person can't get the food or sandwich or coffee or experience that they want. But the downside of that is that the negative experience will also feed back on the cafe themselves, who had no part in this because they weren't forewarned that you were coming. So it's just an important message to reiterate. We're all consumers. We're going through COVID. We have a reduced workforce. Make sure yourselves as consumers that you're pre-booking anything that you want to do, but also make sure as operators that we're delivering that message. Okay, we've come to the end. Hurrah! All right, as you slowly wake up and pull your questions out from the side, I'll just get into a few questions. I've been ticking off the ones that I believe that we've answered, and my expert panel over there, if you get ready, the microphone letter is next to you. You might need to pass it over. Immediately passing it to Jill. That's nice, isn't it? The first one's actually Scott. Scotty is to you. Good on you. Scott loves this. We're interested to know what the passenger disembarking pathway will look like if it will follow a similar flow to previous years. And my understanding, Scott, is that it will have a similar flow or exact same flow as previous. Is that right?
Correct, Alex. Can you go back to that last map you had previously, Dave, showing DST?
I can. Dave, can you get there faster, or would you like me to?
Well, that's probably just the easiest way. As I said, the similar arrangements will be in place as what they have been for our previous cruise ship seasons. The terminology I use, we either have a high level of traffic control or a low level. So if you go to waterside, Alec, if we've got a vessel in and we can use that path, we'll be using that pathway to get all the cruise ship passengers into the city. Unfortunately, when the other one we have, if we've got a vessel, it's a larger vessel, and we've got to go down Hunter Street, yes, correct, towards that area there, and they'll cross straight across where the private operators are operating, and then that way into the city from there. So it's similar arrangements as we've had in the past, with traffic controllers in place to help stop the traffic flow as well, and make sure we provide a safe access for the passengers in and out of the city.
Yeah. And every single year I leave my office in Castro Esplanade and I turn right by Rob's office at Pennicott and forget that there's a cruise ship in town and have to turn around. Every single year. I can't even work it out myself.
And you ring me every time and complain about it.
Yeah, I don't complain. Scott, back to you again. Will there be formal parking for operators to pick up guests, and where is this located? So I'll go back to the map that you had, if that's okay. Yep.
So we do have arrangements. The red area there is designed as a 5 to 10 minute lay-down pickup area for arranged passenger arrangements if you want to pick up people from there.
So to clarify that, that's, for example, if you've had a pre-booked tour, someone's booked you via the internet 2 months in advance or whatever, and you can use that place and say, I'll pick you up at that area.
Sorry, Alice, I just had a question adding to that while you're on that topic. Like sometimes when the cruise ship customers or guests are coming off the ships, they're not always at the front of the line. They might have to wait for 50 other people to get off. So I've found in previous years, in pre-COVID cruise ship seasons, that the 5 to 10 minute window sometimes isn't enough. Because you're standing there, you've got the sign, you're waiting, and they don't turn up for 20 minutes, sometimes half an hour.
So, yeah, I'll just repeat that question for the recording. So the question was that it can take passengers a while to get off due to whether they're eating their second croissant of the day or they just get delayed. And the reflection was that the 5 to 10 minute window may be a little short. We can take that one on notice, Scott, or?
Well, my friend has just relayed here. So alternative independent tour operators need to park legally in a waterfront voucher parking area, in a public area, and then arrange to meet their customers there. If you're going to exceed that 5 to 10 minute arrangement in the little red zoned area where we've got set aside there, and then attempt to park somewhere else and get your cruise ship passengers to that location. It is a challenging one. I know, I understand that.
Thank you very much, Scott. So, yeah, use the existing parking meters on Hunter Street.
Correct.
Great. How can we more easily work with cruise operators to showcase Tasmanian products and attractions? Now, Aletta, this kind of fits with you, and a lot of that information was in the presentation. Did you want to touch on some of the work that you're doing with the shore excursion companies moving forward?
I can, if you want. I guess one of our kind of key activity areas is really looking for ways that we can improve the value proposition of the cruise sector for Tasmania. And the Shore program is one of our key ways to do that. So I think I covered fairly succinctly before that. What we really want to do is build diversity into that Shore program. So all different types of experiences, different type size groups, different regional dispersals, different ways we put itineraries together, different kinds of inclusions. And we're covering a very diverse market. We have people who absolutely want to, hop on a helicopter, buzz up to Wineglass, or Freycinet, or maybe they want to go to Meadowbank or something like that, have an amazing wine experience and come back. We have other clients who want a walking tour of the city and get really immersed into, the story of our city on a short walk. So we have the whole spectrum of clients that we're coping with, and it provides lots of scope for us to work with operators.
Thank you, Aletta. Hans, there's a question from you here. Will there be expanded space for more operators near the cruise ship dock? Are you talking about the hawking area being expanded, or...?
I thought there might have been room for a third tier closer to the information centre. You've got the 8, but there's more than the 8.
Okay, so the question was whether there was a second hawking area, I suppose, closer to the information centre. There isn't in our plans. We haven't actually had, in any of the years we've been running it, any applications over the 8 so far. If we did, we would look to expand, but we haven't so far. And my perception of this season is we've actually got slightly less operators due to COVID than we had previously, so there isn't at the moment. There has historically been hawking areas on Elizabeth Street outside the council centre, which is run specifically by the council themselves, so that may be something that you might want to investigate, but that's outside the information centre themselves. George, question from you. Are all vendors in equal locations and equal sizes on the terminal? Do guides and drivers need training to enter the terminal area? I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, that guides and drivers you're quite happy to enter the terminal area. View the cruise terminal as being a bit like an airport where you have landside and airside. You can go into an airport and walk around, meet passengers, but you can't go on the air side unless you have a ticket. Same with the cruise lines. There's basically a door, but you can go into the cruise terminal without formal training. What you can't do is go in there and try and sell your wares. That's what you can't go and hawk your products at the cruise passengers inside the cruise terminal. Is that get a thumbs up, Scott?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. But George, are all vendors in equal locations and equal sizes in the terminal? At the Davies Street location?
At the visitors location within the terminal building.
Yeah. Well, look, it's the volunteers are key to that. The volunteers do an incredible job of giving that initial information out and wayfinding and direction. But currently the cruise terminal is information provision at the moment. So the sales are done up at the TTRC or the hawking area. There is, as I said, a pilot that we're looking at for potentially sell inside the cruise terminal. But vendors, as in tour operators, aren't allowed to sell inside the cruise terminal themselves.
If I may just add to that.
Yes.
So we are also, as I mentioned, looking at improved digital wayfinding. So it is a project at the moment, but hopefully we can get there before the cruise ship season.
As long as it's an equal footing, I suppose, between all the different sales agents for those that have not pre-booked.
Yes, but there's no sales agents inside the cruise terminal per se. They'd be down at the hawkers area, yeah. Good. Now, Bronwyn, of course. Where are you? There you go. Will the Salamanca Arts Centre be promoted as a key destination for passengers and crew? And the second part of the question didn't come up. But fundamentally, in the cruise arrivals guide, Salamanca is very well represented there. My advice in that area, and I know your passion for promotion of the arts and the Salamanca area, rightly so, is to engage with the volunteers through the City of Hobart, through Adi, through Luke Kazali. Any new initiatives, products, events that might be happening down at the Salamanca Arts Centre, get that information to the Information Centre and they can build it into their program so the volunteers are aware of it and they can use that as the welcome, as the passengers come off to promote that area, definitely.
I was just going to add to that though, as well, for the Salamanca, can I just say that get in touch with the cruise lines or even through the ground handlers, because I know a lot of them are looking to do special activities in destinations now. So because they've got a growing increase of staying later at night, or at least, and sometimes overnight, looking for local activities that they can do special groups with is very high on their agendas at the moment.
Thank you, Jill. Yes.
There was a part that didn't come up related to, I'm not sure whether you had it there or not.
I can say, will there be any cruise rook? And that's all I've got.
So the situation is, I was wondering, and I was envisaging there being actually representation from the cruise ship people here maybe, whether or not there was provision given to the purchase of artworks once these items were on board, whether there any special provision for looking after them, storing them, or whatever.
So the question was whether there are any special provisions for storing fragile or high quality artworks on board. I certainly know that, Jill, there is provision for alcohol on board, to store alcohol, I believe. I don't know myself about the art, but...
Look, I think in terms of specifics, a lot of the cabins have got plenty of room to store such a thing as well. But the cruise lines are very intent at the moment of really having that immersive experience and supporting destinations. So I think that they will be quite happy to do so.
We can certainly raise that with them, Bronwyn.
I think the only experience I've had is when it actually comes into a quarantine discussion.
Yeah.
And artwork, I don't believe fits into that.
No.
I suppose it was from a valuable perspective,
Well, that would be an independent person to have their travel insurance and look after that. I don't think the cruise line would take on the responsibility necessarily from valuable items, but in terms of actual storage, there is reasonable room on board ships.
Lots of bubble wrap.
Can I add, Alex, can I just add to that as well? Because
yes.
I've actually heard of people purchasing very valuable, $25,000 worth of art. But in my experience, they have generally just had it shipped home, because those cruises might be a 5-day out of Sydney back again, or they might be a 138-day world cruise. So in order to de-risk it, they tend to want to freight it home.
Thank you. Scott, back to you. Will Tasports security tags be available to volunteers if they need to work in another section of the port? I suppose this comes down to the MAC 4-5 arrivals that in previous years there has been an identification tag for the volunteers, and that's probably something we can pick up with the City of Hobart. But
yeah, for sure, Alex. We have had a lot of change in our clientele from a security perspective since our last cruise ship seasons. So I can imagine we would be looking and exploring that option in the next couple of days to determine what's going to be available and how we identify the volunteers working out on MAC 4.
Thank you. So questions from the floor, and remember, keep them short, because I want to have to remember them and then have to repeat them. So 2 or 3 words is about my limit. Yes, David.
Hi, Alex. I was just interested in the little 5-minute red pickup area. What size vehicles can pick up in there?
So thank you. The question is to you, Scott. What size vehicles can use the 5 to 10 minute pickup area?
So that's probably more dedicated towards a 12-seater capacity mini-sized bus, or or the limousines or your pre-arranged tours, smaller vehicles.
Thank you, Nicole.
Just picking up on what you said before about artworks, can we somehow have some kind of communication with passengers and cruise ships about booze? Because there are a bunch of tourism operators who have distilleries and a vested interest therefore in selling booze. And I can tell you, there are a bunch of cruise passengers, particularly who go through Hill Street Pier, who love to buy, but for whatever reason, they don't receive the correct information about what can be stored in bond on ships.
So the question.
I mean, we have the same problem at the airport, but if we can make that clear from the get-go, I think some of the issues with Tasports here in particular is you can stick a big tire out front and just hope people kick it, because you know you're going to do a lot of tastings for not a lot of reward. We send stuff back, that's absolutely a solution that we come up with, but it would really help if we could just get that in the button at some point.
Thank you, Nicole, for the short question. Only teasing. The question was, can we get some communication to the cruise passengers about what they're allowed to take back on board, what the bond requirements are? Because Tasmania's distilling industry is world leading, there's a lot of it, and there's a desire for the passengers to buy it. I might, Adi, has in previous years on the Cruise Arrivals Guide been a good platform to put some of that sort of information on through the biosecurity, and I think that has been in there before, so that I might leave that thought bubble floating with you. But certainly, again, the volunteers, I think what we need to do is understand what the procedures are from the cruise lines, and my understanding is that they're absolutely delighted to take and welcome to take things back on board, but they may need to be held in bond until they depart.
So also to add to that, Alex, Mike Mihailov in our last session down here did agree for the Carnival group lines to put together a kind of arrival information sheet on the passenger demographics and the likes, but also to put onto that sheet for the destinations their requirements that they're going to have for those ships, because they do differ from cruise line to cruise line. But I think if both Aletta and I can follow up with Mike around that, we'll make sure that that's added to the list and that can be shared pre-arrival.
Yeah. Mike Mihailov was the one who was looking at a barrel at Callington Mill.
I couldn't get him out of Callington Mill, so he's trying to work out how many barrels he can get on the ship.
So you've got an advocate there. Questions from the floor? One last one, Aletta, I'll come to you. You've been delighted to have this, Dorothy Dixer. We've had a question sent to us before, which is, will there be a cap on the number of cruise ship passenger numbers on any day, as mentioned in the Hobart Mercury paper? So I can say that the answer to that initially is no. There won't be a cap of any passengers this year. There is ongoing work that the government are doing with the Tourism Industry Council of Tasmania to look at the future and value proposition of cruising, and there has been a government report delivered to them. But the TICT do have a position as a board about cruising, and one of those positions was about having a managed cap of people coming in. To a certain extent, we have that already in Hobart. We have committed as a port through Tasports to not have more than 3 ships in, 2 ships in town, thank you for the recording, 2 ships in port at any one time, which essentially keeps those 2 largest ships at a minimum. So that's the answer. But Aletta, I might hand over to you the government's current position on cruising.
The government has put out, or the Premier has put out a press release some time ago to say how we're currently going to work through cruising. And really that involves Tourism Tasmania and Tasports and some of the other stakeholders working together to find ways to improve the value proposition of the cruise market for Tasmania. We've also got some specific work, which is destination management related work around particularly the expedition sector and which regional ports and anchorages are suitable for cruise shipping and which ones are not. So that work is ongoing. Particularly Tourism Tasmania is currently working with Parks and Wildlife Service on that, but it will be broader than those. It will need to have some discussions with industry and with the community as that goes on. There's also some sort of across-agency, across-government management of the cruise sector that we're looking at. There hasn't been any direct response around a number or a cap, or I don't believe the Premier has made a direct response to the TICT's announcement at the conference. So at the moment, Tourism Tasmania's position is that we're working through these management issues that we have. We're actively on it, and we'll keep going in that direction for now.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the floor before we break? Yes, Parry.
This relates to Artie. Artie, has there been any arrangements made with the Hobart City Council for parking in the Argyle Street car park by the volunteers?
So the question is to Artie, has there been any provision for the volunteers for car parking in the Argyle Street car park?
Yeah, it has been looked into, so we will be going, there's none at Tasports, but there will be at Argyle Street.
And it's free of charge, of course.
Yes, for volunteers, yes indeed.
Yes, twice the cost. Thank you very much. We'll run a little bit over, so I do apologise for your time, but there is morning tea outside, so do go and get fully involved, fill up your stomachs and have a chat with each other, and thank you very much for your time.
Alec, can I just clarify something before we break?
Yes, you can.
Something I thought might have been missed and it might have just got a bit construed when we talked about volunteers that may need to work out on Mac 4. And I just wanted to point out too, if you're a bus operator as well and you've got the need to take your bus out onto the Macquarie 4 area, you'll need to make sure you do the induction, the Tasports induction online, and then also making sure that in that case as well, that you're talking to the shipping agent in regards to that vessel to make sure all your details are captured on the VSL. To make sure, that then you won't get rejected when you get to the gate by the angry security guards.
Thank you, Scott. Any other, any points anyone would like to make? Thank you for your time.